Looks like it's gonna be good enough. Oh, of course. You get an update.
Okay, let's turn our attention to the group.
Give us a second. We had an update.
Yeah, we have to do the update.
Oh, take your time. I was trying to find some music videos there. It didn't work out. I'll figure out which one it is.
Oh, wait, why am I going
Another
to
song. Google Slides. Is that just like
It's like
all at
PowerPoint.
once?
But
It's
just
like
by Google.
It's like better for like team projects.
It's easier to share stuff.
Yeah,
with people.
exactly.
It's like, Google has their own version of like Microsoft everything. Like Google has their slides. They have the same thing for
They
Excel.
have sheets too, yeah.
That's what my phone is really like.
Yeah, I got you.
But I feel like that's not
Yeah, I agree.
What's the other one? Is it stevia or something like that? Or maybe
Canva?
that's a sugar.
Thank you.
Canva.
No, there's another one that's like kind of fancier or something like
For
that.
Like for
slides?
Excel.
Canva. You could do like a. It's
There's
not
another
Canva.
one.
It's
Maybe
more
it's-
like artsy.
Yeah, I don't keep up with
Canvas for like
it.
graphics and stuff.
Okay.
Oh, I was looking at like the microphone.
No coffees today?
Everyone ready?
Wait, wait.
What time are we looking at here right now? 12:38, so we'll shoot, we're starting a little late, so we'll 1:05-ish.
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing today?
Pretty well.
Come on. How's everyone doing today?
Amazing.
A little bit better. All right. Well, today we're going over Starbucks and their human resource practices in the United States and China. But first, I got the chance for you guys to win a $15 gift card to Starbucks. You just have to answer this question. How many Starbucks are there worldwide? Go.
Specific number?
Closest to it.
4,500.
4,500.
Wow, that's what I was gonna say.
Huh?
3,000?
3,000.
2,300.
2,300. Big number, guys. Think
This
big.
is like
50,000.
50,000.
75,000.
70. All right. That's a little smaller.
22,000.
115,000.
115. Is everyone out?
43,000.
43?
38.
38,000. Wow, we got it close. Here we go. So there's approximately 38,000 Starbucks worldwide. Over 16,000 of them happen to be in the U.S. and over 21,000 outside the U.S. Now what we're going to go over today, guys, I want to give you a preview. We're going to go over a brief
Introduce
history.
yourselves first.
Oh, yeah, sorry. My name, of course, is Eddie Tapia.
Maria Casaridella.
Hannah Smith and Kaylee Scott.
Apologize, guys.
There's
Today,
energy.
yeah, got that caffeine going. So here's what you guys can expect out of this presentation. We're going over a brief history of Starbucks. We're going to bring up Hofstede and his cultural values. We're going to talk about the HRM practices in the US and China, some international programs, and places for them to improve. All right, sound good? So starting off, Starbucks was first established in 1971 in Seattle, Washington. Their first location was in the Pike Palace Market. For the first 10 years, Starbucks was pretty much a run-of-the-mill coffee shop until about the 1980s when a man by the name of Howard Schultz came into the company, all right? Howard Schultz was inspired by his travels to Italy, specifically Milan, where he enjoyed a beautiful espresso and a wonderful cafe and that Italian coffee culture. He was inspired to bring this back to the United States, and that's what's credited with bringing Starbucks to where it is today, with that warm feeling when you walk into a coffee shop and that nice warm feeling that we get. So the largest market for Starbucks still happens to be the United States, so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start off taking a look at Hofstede's values, but we're going to look at this not as an anthropologist might, but as a business person might. So first off, we have power distance. The US ranks low in power distance. What this basically translates to, guys, in a work environment, think of employees in the US. They like to be given a set task, set objectives, and they like to be left alone to do their work. They don't really need someone, a boss over their shoulder, micromanaging them, holding their hand through their opportunities. They don't need to do that. Also, they're more likely to speak up in meetings and talk, not necessarily talk back to the management, but point out injustices or point out different ways of doing things. They're not too scared of the powers above them. Next is uncertainty avoidance. They rank low on uncertainty avoidance. What this basically translates to is risk. They're very comfortable with taking on risk. And we see that in the United States. A lot of jobs tend to be low salary, but high commission. People are really invested on betting in themselves in the US and really working for their own pay. That ties into the next point, which is individualism versus collectivism. The US tends to be a more individualistic country. So we could see this in the business world. Most people in the US like to think about, what can this job do for me? How can I make more money here? How can I get a promotion? How can I improve myself? Where collectivism is more of the we. How can we move forward? How can we do better? The next is masculine versus feminine. The US tends to be a more masculine country. This dates back to the 1940s, the 50s, the 60s, where that traditional gender role of the man goes out to work, they're hard workers, that sort of thing. Nowadays, that's kind of gotten more balanced out and it's more of a mix, but we'd still overall say that the US is more of a masculine culture. Last up is their long-term versus short-term orientation. The US is very short-term oriented in business, guys. We see this from time to time. They're constantly thinking, what are we doing today, tomorrow, this week, this quarter, this fiscal year? And we see this. Most executives in the US are on the hot seat from quarter to quarter if they don't produce earnings. It's very short-term oriented in the US. Other countries like Eastern Asia, China, Japan, they're long-term oriented. Business plans are 5, 10, 15, even 50 years isn't uncommon. Now that we have a better idea of the sandbox that we're playing in with the US, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how Starbucks actually uses this in their company in the US. Excuse me. So Starbucks' HRM is involved in almost every aspect of their business, but I just listed a few for the presentation. First up is recruitment. They split recruitment down the middle into part-time and full-time workers. When I say part-time, I want you guys to think about those baristas and front-of-house staff that you're used to seeing on a daily basis. These people are usually front-of-house staff and they have a high turnover rate. People are constantly moving through these jobs. Full-time employees is more of your managers, logistics, operations, all the way up to the C-suites. They generally have a lower turnover rate and they're always on salary. Starbucks partners up with their social media team to do something they call social recruitment for this. This is basically crafting their social presence to make it a nice, warm, inviting company that a lot of people would want to work for. It's very important to attract a lot of clients in, not only clients, but potential job applicants, because they have those high turnover rates with the part-time jobs. Full-time employees, they also use the marketing to target to those individualistic tendencies that I talked about previously, right? Come work at Starbucks. There's career growth improvement. There's developments of your salaries, those sort of things. They're also very involved in the training. They deal with all levels, they deal with training on all levels of employees. So part-time employees do between 20 to 40 hours of on-the-job training. That's learning how to make drinks, interact with customers, but also deal with disputes with customers and disputes in the workplace. Similar training is done for full-time employees, but now they're actually shifting away from those individualistic tendencies to now be more collectivism. You're a part of the Starbucks team now. Work as a team player, build the team up, and also there's going to be disputes. How do we navigate these disputes? HRM helps on all those levels. The next is benefits. Benefits are reserved for full-time employees only. That deals with healthcare and retirement. Now this has been a major point of contention recently if you paid attention to Starbucks in the news. The part-time employees have started to unionize and asking for better working conditions and more benefits. And this has been the job of the human resources as well as public relations to navigate this minefield. It's very difficult to deal with unions in this day and age, and the jury's still out on whether they're doing a good or a bad job. But it's one job that I would definitely not want to have, guys. It's very difficult. When we bring up unions, it's not a very fair comparison to bring up China here, because unions are a thing in China, but they have to be approved by the Chinese government. And we know that anything that's really approved by the Chinese government is kind of controlled by the Chinese government. So we don't feel that it is a fair comparison to compare the unions across the board. Now that we have a better understanding of how Starbucks uses their HRM in the US, I'm going to pass it over to Hannah, and she's going to talk to you guys a little bit about China.
Thanks, Eddie. So Eddie went over a lot of the U.S. human resource management practices, and I'm going to go over more China. So we're going to start with Hofstede. China has a high power distance of a score of about 80 for Hofstede. This means that they do like to have that authoritarian figure that manages them and that coaches them and someone to like look up to in that way. They also score pretty low on uncertainty avoidance, so this means they're more willing to take risks and that they are more willing to accept ambitious opportunities. They are a collectivist culture, which they differ from the US in that way because they like to think as a group and how they can benefit the group. They are a very masculine culture. They're about a 66, so it's not super high, but they're still considered masculine, and that means that they're driven by that competition and achievements. Lastly, they're a long-term oriented culture. Unlike the US, which is short term, they focus on what's going to happen in the future. In the long term, they focus on things such as traditions and saving, but they also like to set challenging goals for themselves and are persistent in achieving those goals in order to obtain results. So recruitment and selection. There are 3 ways that Chinese employees get recruited in Starbucks. The first way is through campus, so this is like the job fairs that we see on our campus a lot. They also do social, like they do in the US, like Eddie mentioned, where they like to attract employees through either social media or through friends and family. And their most popular form of recruitment is internal recruitment. So this is where they promote from within the company, and we see this as China is a polycentric, and that means that they have a lot more local employees than they do international employees. So that's why they like to promote from within the company and keep people within the company. For performance, they also have been seeing some controversy with their age and education gap because a lot of employees are under the age of 30 and about 65% of them have a bachelor's degree. So there's been some tension between those differing levels and characteristics with the international employees. So performance management, like I said, they're low uncertainty avoidance and long-term oriented. So they like to set these challenging goals for themselves in order to meet performance indicators. And these performance indicators are gone over in their reviews. And they do regular performance reviews every 6 months in order to keep employees motivated and working towards that goal. Compensation and benefits is a lot different in China than it is in the US. So they offer health and disability benefits for not only full-time but also part-time employees. They also, which is pretty interesting, will get involved into family issues and help you with family struggles or personal issues you have in order to improve your work performance. And lastly, they have a clear promotion route. So they'll start you off as that beverage clerk, barista, and then you can be promoted all the way up to an operational manager, which kind of shows their masculinity as well, because they're driving off of that competition in order to reach these goals. They develop specific management training programs, and in these programs, they go over their values, which include corporate culture and work and service skills. These programs cannot exceed 96 hours of training in the first month. And unfortunately, only 22% of employees agree with this cross-cultural training program. And this is because of the huge pay gap between US and Chinese employees. So Chinese employees are feeling like they're being treated differently and therefore are losing motivation because of that. Next, I'm gonna pass it off to Kaylee, who's gonna talk about our international programs.
We wanted to go into more in depth about the international program for Starbucks, specifically in China, because it is currently the company's largest and fastest growing international market, which is why we also think there's more potential for it to grow rapidly. So to start with, the compensation that they allow their international and expatriate employees is the hardship allowances, office stipend allowances, which just helps set up home offices, car and parking allowances, store mileage allowances, and then child education allowances and military allowances. For their expatriates specifically, they offer housing and tax allowances and the cost of living adjustment. They also have recently gotten to 100% equal pay for men and women, which is a huge win for Starbucks in China and is an incentive to continue for people to apply for jobs and to grow the market there. Some of the programs that they offer benefits to their employees specifically in China is the Parent Care Program, which offers some of their partners critical illness insurance for parents of certain employees. And then there's also the Flex Star benefits, which offers their employees of at least 2 years credits so that they can exchange those for certain benefits of their choosing. And then some of the training that they are helping with the Chinese youth is China Youth Development Program, which is a unique curriculum for developing future leaders in China. It offers 1,500 university students with disadvantaged backgrounds and education and a future career in Starbucks. And they can be enrolled in the program for up to 3 years. And then some of the challenges that specifically expatriates can go through from the US to China is the language barriers, and the hierarchical work culture. And now I'm going to pass it on to Maria to talk about some of the recommendations and conclusions.
All right, so for improvements, these are gonna kind of correlate together for China and the US. When it comes to continuing to utilize technology in a lot of Eastern Asian cultures, when you walk into a restaurant, a cafe, or any place of service, you're usually greeted actually by a machine that you're gonna order at. And now this improves time efficiencies, allows the company to reach more consumers and customers during the day. And that's for China, so they already do that, but I want to bring it to the US and say we should use more technology and the self-service optimization, because we do have the app here, the Starbucks app, that I know a lot of people already use. However, I think there could be more outreach, more marketing, so that consumers are more aware of the app, be it through rewards or things like that, and they can kind of maybe tie in the app with, again, that self-service optimization. Now, for China, we spoke a lot about there not being that many foreign employees working in Starbucks China. We spoke about only 22% of their employees agreeing with their cross-cultural program. And when I say improve cultural literacy, I think there should be more foreigners going to work into Starbucks China, and also more Chinese employees coming into Starbucks in the US, so more expatriates. That kind of ties me into the other point, which is there isn't much of an expatriate program that we can speak on because it's still being developed. Now, they're two very distinct cultures, so they need to work on a way that the Starbucks corporate culture that's very US capitalist can tie into a more homogeneous Chinese culture so that they can work together. We spoke about there not being part-time health and benefits for part-time employees in the US and how that's a big struggle. In China, they do utilize that. They provide the health and benefits for both their part-time and full-time employees. I think this is a practice that can somehow come into the US. Of course, it would have to be tweaked because the Chinese culture is very different from US culture, as we know. So there might be some difficulties in providing those benefits, but I'm sure there's a way, as long as they research, again, the corporate culture and their consumer behavior, and also how their employees feel about everything in general. Then to tie it up, so in conclusion, the two most important parts that I kind of touched on already are cross-cultural literacy and expatriate programs. So for cross-cultural literacy, again, these are two very distinct cultures, and I think they need to tie in employee reviews, what the employees think is the next move for Starbucks, consumer behavior, what do consumers in each location think about Starbucks, and utilizing more technology like I mentioned. For expatriate programs, like it says here, it's still being developed. I believe that they can do way more research to get more foreigners into China, try to pay them the same so that there's not that pay discrepancy that we talked about, as well as having more Chinese employees as well come to the US, so that both countries and cultures can kind of come together, see what works for each side, and get into even more foreign countries with Starbucks. They do have 38,000 stores, but of course they can grow. So yeah, this is our presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and do you guys have any questions?
When you were talking about Starbucks US, I remember reading about a program that pays for students' education. I recall Arizona State University as an example.
Of Starbucks having, paying for the college?
Yeah.
Yeah, Starbucks has many different programs that they tend to do to try to get more people into the company. Like, that's similar to the social recruitment.
Mm.
That's kind of tied into that, where I talked about how they're trying to like get in people, especially in these part-time employees. Because most college students, they want to be part-time, they don't want to be full-time. So it's more of an incentive to get these people into those jobs and paying for their schooling and hopefully stay in the company to go into operations, logistics, something like that.
But they still, I think they still pay for, I don't know if it's part-time or full-time workers, but I think they pay for baristas and things of that nature. I suppose if they, obviously if they stay with the company,
Yeah.
maybe they hope that they'll go into management after they finish.
Yeah, and it makes sense for the age group that you're talking about, because about 4 out of 5 employees for Starbucks happen to be under the age of 30. So it's right in that realm of those college-age
I'm
students.
curious to see how that works, because as far as a return on investment, because you're talking about, what's the average hourly wage of a barista in the US?
It's now about $16.75.
16.75.
When you take the highs of like places like California and stuff like
But does
that.
that doesn't include tips and everything, or?
I don't believe it does.
No, that's not bad. The main thing also in this area, when you talk about unions, when I think about Starbucks, I kind of think about employees becoming upset because they try to stamp out unions. This is a layperson's perspective from the outside, but that's what I read. They don't like unions, they don't want unions, they try to do everything they can to stop unions. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, of course.
My
So-
perception.
Yeah, so looking at it from a Starbucks perspective, they don't really want unions because unions are a lack of control. They have less control over their employees. They can't kind of get them to do what they want. But obviously, looking at it from an employee part, they want better working conditions. They want those benefits. They want healthcare. They want retirement potentially. Maybe not so much retirement if you're part-time, but it's a very difficult thing to navigate because it depends on what side of the aisle you're looking at it from, right? If we're taking ourselves removed and we're talking about our own business, we kind of want more control over your business. But obviously, as an employee, you want to be protected by the place that you're working for, and you want to feel like you're valued. And I think a lot of this, for why they're unionizing, is they're feeling undervalued and they're feeling like they're not getting paid enough. They're doing hard jobs. I mean, anyone that's dealt with some type of customer service job or in the food industry, you know, people are terrible. So they want to be compensated.
Yeah, we have a union at FAU, and not everybody has to join. But they did introduce something where if 60% of faculty and staff, or whatever the number they're counting, don't sign up for the union, it's gonna go away. So I think
Really?
they would like to get rid of that as well at
Oh, wow.
FAU, for instance.
Yeah, they want more than half to be unionized here, or at least to approve it. That's a lot.
Yeah, to pay the dues.
Yeah, to pay the dues, of course.
And if not, they said, well, I guess they got it, because it's still in effect, I think. I didn't hear anything else, but it seems to be somewhat of an antagonistic relationship. I don't pay that much attention to it. But at least at FAU kind of thing.
Of course.
Anyone else can jump right in. Anybody go to Starbucks? You like Starbucks? Like, I'm kind of a bit of a coffee aficionado. I have my own, like, real one at home, with the double
Like
boiler.
an actual espresso
Like
machine.
Yeah, I have mine.
Yeah, and I got this, I hear the grinder is more important than the,
To grind up the coffee beans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got this one from Seattle. This guy just makes it. He's an engineer who just started his own business, and it's the only grinder I could find that there were almost no negatives.
Oh, okay.
All that. It's kind of expensive, but it does a good job. But when I think of Starbucks, and obviously, I've had some coffee there. I think I'm more of like, I don't want to go as far as the McDonald's of coffee, but it's sort of like a more of a, I don't know, maybe he had that, it doesn't taste like the coffee I get in Naples, Italy.
Exactly. I'm very glad that you brought that up. Yeah, so they kind of shifted. Like in the beginning, they were like a normal small mom and pop type of coffee shop, and they were like that. And then when Brian Schultz came in, or Howard Schultz, excuse me, he wanted to bring that Italian coffee vibe. If anyone's ever been to Italy and had a coffee, it's very like a warm environment, you're enjoying your coffee. And that's what they wanted to be, this nice warm coffee shop. And if you saw Starbucks in the beginning, they were like that. There was like a cool place to hang out and you could have your laptop and do that. Now, I walked into Starbucks to get that gift card. It's like a McDonald's, like you said. Everything's fast, quick service, on the go. Especially in you gotta think about cities, which are their largest markets. People are just in there grabbing a coffee and they're running on it.
Yeah. But still, you can run out with a great coffee or
Oh yeah, the quality is
sort of an average coffee.
Well, I will say, I studied abroad in Korea. I didn't go to China, obviously, but they're still Eastern Asian. So I believe that in the Chinese aspect, since we were talking about China, when you're in Eastern Asian cultures, coffee is kind of like a place to sit for 3 hours and catch up, right? So there's actually, I was so surprised, Starbucks there are bigger. There's more seating. There's people sitting down for a long time in the Starbucks. And I think they were able to do that cultural, not mending, cultural connection to be able to stay alive in those cultures. Because otherwise, people aren't just grabbing their coffee and going. In most cases, cafe, at least in Korea, is a very oh, let's hang out, let's go to a cafe, let's talk, It's like a place to meet, to be at. So, but here, it's like grab your coffee, go. There's no one sitting down at a Starbucks really, so unless they're studying.
And with the app, you order online.
And the app, and it's becoming more optimized. So yeah.
There's a store in Seattle that's like a, I don't know what you would call it, it's like they do testing and tastings and things like that, some kind of a,
Like a reserve.
what?
It's called like the Starbucks Reserve.
Yeah, you've heard of it, I've been there, we went there one time, it was pretty good, they had some better coffees and things like that, whatever it's called, I don't know, some kind of, it's not down by Pike's Market, it's up the hill someplace, and I don't remember, but, did you hear about that place?
Yeah, I think the Starbucks, it's called Starbucks Reserve, and it's kind of like a test facility, but also like an elevated Starbucks experience.
Yeah.
I think they also have one in New York, if I'm not
Oh wait,
mistaken.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, they
it's
have-
like made day of or something like that.
Yeah,
Day
it's
of
like just like an
or-
elevated experience.
Yeah.
I didn't look too much into it because it wasn't like in our forte. But
Overall, I found a couple better places in Seattle.
I'm sure you can find better places than the Starbucks.
I kind of like,
Oh, you taught at Washington State, right?
yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
But I kind of, when I go someplace, I was supposed to go to Seoul in the summer, I couldn't go because I got sick, I've been there before, but anyway, I look through the Google and I try to find the place with the best coffee beans, I like light roasted, organic, this and that. Sumatra or Ethiopian, different beans and things, so. One of the questions I had on compensation and benefits, you mentioned family, that they help out on some things. Could you give me some more specifics with that?
Yeah, so in the article that I read, it was kind of just going over like, because they are a collectivist culture, so they focus more on the group and how they can improve the group. And of course, like someone's struggling at home or struggling with something, like they're not going to be benefiting the company in any way or benefiting, because Starbucks is a lot of teamwork and working together, so they're not going to be benefiting in any of that way. So I think with China's like collectivist culture, they really try to help out, especially even if it is with families, which in the US you would probably never see anywhere. Everyone stays out of everyone's personal life. So I thought that was interesting to add in.
Well, it could be, for example, work-family balance, things of that nature. We're working on a study right now that's related to gender equality, but then it bleeds over into, maternity leaves, paying childcare, things of that nature. Is that what kind of stuff could be?
Yeah, like it's stuff like, because she mentioned a lot of the international programs too, how they do like parent care, military, like benefits as well. So I think it's all kind of involved in that family and helping out the family.
Could you put up this slide, please? Anybody else got anything? I don't mean to monopolize the conversation here. This little slide that,
So, I did some research back in Starbucks last semester, and back then they were struggling. Did you guys see that they were struggling in China?
Yeah, Starbucks has been struggling the past couple years over and over. That same guy that I talked about, Howard Schultz, he was the CEO. He's had 3 stints as the CEO because they've been doing so bad. In his final 3rd stint, he tried to find another replacement to help improve profits and get the company back on track. That guy failed, and now they just went out and got the CEO from Chipotle, who was notorious for like increasing Chipotle's costs and cutting portions and stuff. And now he's working for Starbucks. He's the CEO of Starbucks, and that's stirred a lot of controversy because people are saying like, hey, he's notorious for cutting costs and all this stuff. So Starbucks is happy, but little side note, Starbucks made a rule that you have to be in the office 3 days a week, and he refuses to move to Seattle. So they sent a company jet to pick him up in Huntington Beach, and he flies 3 times a week to Seattle. So
is he worth it?
I hope. Jury's still
Paying him a
out.
lot.
Any other questions? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. So if everyone wants to get set up, we'll start about 1:15, and I'll debrief this one here. Talking about